Hi, I'm Mr. Fred, and we're going to work on building a game called Pong. Now, Pong is based on a classic game known as ping pong. It's one of the first video games ever mass produced, and it's quite old. But it's a great game to become familiar with some really important coding concepts. So what you're going to see over the next few modules is a series of instructions that are going to utilize a game programming environment known as Scratch, which many of you are familiar with. And if you haven't worked with Scratch before in great detail, I would encourage you to go check out the Build a Game tutorial, where I introduce you to a whole variety of concepts to learn how to build a game and also some coding. So going forward, you're going to see tutorial steps that are going to guide you through building the basic game of Pong. Then, being a huge fan of Star Wars, I'm going to then take that game and show you how you can modify it and turn it into a game where we battled the Jedi versus the Sith with lightsabers. Now, even that game will take you so far. The reason why I stopped it at a certain point is for you then to use your own imagination to take the game a step further. You could vary up by introducing new lightsabers or new sounds, or even maybe some new twists to the game itself.
What is it? Your father's lightsaber. This is the weapon of a Jedi Knight. Not as clumsy or random as a blaster. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age.
So I'm going to lay that foundation for you. And as you go through this tutorial, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, Fred at getmecoding.com, or inside of our course space, you can message me there too. I wish you the best of luck and have a ton of fun building this classic game into something, well, that's pretty cool. Good luck. Okay, so before we begin, I thought the best thing we could do is come out and take a look at what the final project for this first part is going to look like. So we're looking at now a version of the game that I built. Once again, this is Pong. It's classic, it's simple, and it's probably the best way to learn some really basic concepts for building a game or something interactive using Scratch and still learning about coding. Now, once we click this flag, we're going to come in here and we're going to see that the game can be controlled with the keys on the keyboard, and you'll notice now as we play it, there's a score of 0 and a score of 0 for player 1 and player 2. So now player 1 scores, player scores again, player 1 scores a third time, and then player scores one more time. The game goes up to 5, and that is it, and it'll then report player 1 wins. Okay, so now that's how the game is played, but what does it look like inside? So let's click that. And now once we're in here, we're going to see that this is the Scratch environment. If you have not created your Scratch account yet, what I would ask you to do is go back to the link in the other module, which is going to take you out there, and it's going to take you another free course here at getmecoding.com, and you can go ahead and you could try out using Scratch. So I'm not going to go into great depth about what these blocks are and the environment. That's in the other tutorial. All right, now, when you come in here, you're going to see that we have 3 sprites. We have paddle 1, the ball, and then paddle 2. Paddle 1 has the coding blocks associated that allow the paddle to move up and down, and we utilize the up arrow and the down arrow keys on the keyboard. For paddle 2, we make use of the W key and the S key. Now, when I click these drop downs in a few minutes, you're going to see that you could pick other keys and it'll work just as fine. So that's the paddles. The ball is really where all the coding takes place in this version of the game. And you're going to see that we're going to walk through this entire set of code blocks, and we're going to touch on what are the key coding concepts, and then ultimately go into the Star Wars version of the game in a little bit. Okay, so now we're here in your starting project. This is going to be the very beginning of this. Scratch opens up, there's Scratch the cat, and we need to start getting set up with our sprites. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is we're going to go ahead and name this. I'm going to call this Classic Pong. And now I'm going to come in and I'm going to also remove Scratch the Cat. So we start with a very, very blank slate. First thing we're going to want to do though is we're going to add in our paddles. And to do that, we could draw a paddle or we can make use of a paddle. So let's come in and we're going to add a sprite by coming down here to choose a sprite. And we're going to click on the item in here. And you can see that there's all kinds of options in here. And you can see that there's buttons and balls and so on. So maybe the best way to go is to create our own. And this is one of the first areas I could tell you that you can maybe customize it. But let's go ahead. We're going to paint it. And that's going to open up our paint window. We're going to make sure that we select the line drawing tool. And we'll go ahead and we can make our color here black in a moment. But we're going to go ahead and draw a tool. Now, to get that line to go straight, you can hold down the Shift key and then draw your line. And there you have your first line. Now, you'll notice, though, it's not that thick, so we can actually make it a little bit thicker. And to do that, so we're going to come in and we're going to create our own. We're going to paint it using the paint tool. When you come in here, you're going to notice a few things. Depending upon what you've done prior to this, you'll see some values differ slightly. But right now, we'll notice that there's a button down here that says Convert to Bitmap. So we're working what's known as the vector mode. So we're going to create our first paddle. And to do that, I want to make sure your settings are currently at 25. Your fill is set here at the slash, and then the outline is like that. So come in to the line tool, holding your Shift key down on your keyboard, start from the top and work your way down. And that is your line, and you can see it appear up here in the workspace. So when you click on the arrow key, you'll notice that when you come back in and click on your paddle, you'll see that it has a set of handles, and that allows you now to move it around. The most important part about this paddle building exercise is making sure that the center of whatever it is you drew is placed on the crosshairs here inside of your canvas. So we're going to take that and place it right there on the center. That is the center of the object. So when you move it on the screen, it's always going to be in reference to that. So there's your first paddle. And it says Costume 1, but let's call that Paddle 1. And we're going to come over now, and we could see that over here we have we're in our Costumes tab, but let's click on the code. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add another sprite, but if you right-click, taking your mouse and pressing the right mouse button, you could say Duplicate. And now you have two paddles, and you can see them appearing up here. So when I come in here and right-click on this, or when I come in here and I click on it, I can come into my costumes and I could see Paddle 1 and I could see Paddle 2. Let's go ahead and name them also. So here you'll see in the window, it says Sprite 1. Let's call that Paddle 1. Always naming your objects that you're building with an appropriate name is very helpful when you learn to program. Sprite 2 will be Paddle 2. All right. Whenever you look in here, you'll also notice that you can hide or show certain things. So if I click on the eye, it hides it. If I click on it again, it displays it. All right, so now let's begin to code these guys. Whenever we get into coding anything in Scratch, we want to make sure that we select the sprite that we're currently working with, or the stage if we're working with a stage. So the paddle is going to be right there, and we want to make sure that the paddle is going to be positioned about where we want it to be. So I'm going to place Paddle 1 there and Paddle 2 there. And when I click on Paddle 1, I could see that it's placed in a position here, -196 and 0. And then also if I click on Paddle 2, it's at position 206 and 3. That's because it's part of an XY coordinate plane on the screen. So we're going to come into coding, and when we come into events, when the green flag is clicked, let's click on Paddle 1, drag out when green flag is clicked, motion, we are going to place this paddle in that position at all start. Just in case something gets moved, it'll always go to that position when the green flag is clicked, which means the start of the game. We're going to do the same thing with Paddle 2. And we're going to say events, when the green flag is clicked is already there. Motion, we'll say go to, and you'll notice that it already has the values in there of what they are here, or where we placed it on the canvas. All right, now to move them, let's go back to paddle 1. When we're going to move paddle 1, we are going to see that we're going to have a event, and that event is going to be the when a key is pressed, we'll do something. So for this one on the left side, I'm going to use the W and the S key. You could use any keys you like, but I'm going to say when the W key is pressed, I'm going to change the position. So I will come in here. I'm going to change my X position by 10. So it's going to allow it, or excuse me, not my X position. That means X is going left and right, Y is going up and down. Ooh, that's a mistake. So we wanted to be able to move up and down, which is the Y X axis, or excuse me, the Y axis, and the X axis is horizontal, which is left and right. So we want the paddle only to move up and down, and you could change it by 10. So that's going to be 10 going up. If I wanted to go down, I'll go back into my events. When the S key is pressed, we're going to have it go down. Change Y by minus 10. And now we could try that out. And it's working. Click the stop. Now for paddle 2, there's a couple ways we could do this. We could drag all the blocks out, or we could do this one technique. I could take this set of blocks and left click and drag it over onto paddle 2. Now when I click on paddle 2, you could see that it's here now, but we're not going to be using the W key. We're going to use the up arrow. Another trick to make your coding quicker is if I take my mouse and I right click, I could say duplicate. And now I have a duplicate of this set of blocks. I could select the down arrow. Now I'm going to change that by minus 10. So at this point, make sure your code is working for your keys or for your paddles. And they are. You could stop and pause the video at this point and make sure your blocks match my blocks at this point. Okay, at this point now we're going to work on the background, which is the background of the game, also known as a stage or a backdrop in Scratch. So what I'd like you to do is go over here and click on Stage, and you're going to see a new tab up here or a different tab, and that's going to be Backdrops. So make sure you select Backdrops, and you'll notice that you're back into your window where you can paint. What I'd like you to do is select the square object. That's going to allow you to draw a square, and let's go ahead and select the fill. Now, for the fill, we want to make sure that we're going to select a color, and the color is going to be what the border is on the left side behind the left paddle, and then we're going to pick another color for the right side and another color for the top. These three separate colors become really important to note. So let's go ahead. I'm going to slide this around here. I'm going to go with an orangish color. Make sure it's bright enough and vibrant enough that I can see it's orange, and I'm going to make sure that also that I make sure that that is deselected. So you'll notice that when I click this, that means no fill, and that's what the slash goes to. But to bring it back, just click on the color slider. So we have our first color here. Now, as far as outlines go, if I click this, we don't want an outline for that. So if you already have an outline appearing, just come in here and then click off the outline. So it's going to be just a orange square. So now my square is there. I come into my canvas area, and I could stretch out an orange from top to bottom. Okay, so there's your first one. Now, you can take this and making sure it's selected, or a copy, and then a paste. So it duplicates the item. Now, we're going to change the color of that, so we're going to go over to the fill, and I'm going to make that red. So pretty different color. I want to also put a border or a header area, so I'm going to make sure my square is selected again, and I'm going to draw out a border. It's going to be a little bit wider, and I'm going to make that, I'll make it a different color. I'll go with blue, and I can see that it's not long enough, so I click on my mouse, come in here, and drag that over. So I should have all these objects. I notice here this isn't quite on the edge, so if I select it and then using my left and right arrow key on my keyboard, I can move it to be a little bit more precise. Okay. Now I don't know what that little blue dot is here, but I'm going to take my mouse, my eraser, and then just get rid of that. So I'm pretty happy with what that's looking like, and I could see on my game area up here, I have a header and I have my two borders, which are different colors. Those are going to be really important to us. All right, now the next big thing is going to be coding the game itself. So much of the program is tied to the actual ball. So I'm going to come over here now and I'm going to go and I'm going to add a new sprite and I'm going to look for a ball. You can make your own ball, but there is one that's already in here. I'm going to click on that. And now I have that appearing in my game and what I'm going to be working with and coding here. Now, when I come into this, I am going to make sure it's selected. I'm going to go into costumes and I'm going to reduce the size of this ball. So I'm going to click on my mouse, select the ball, and then grab a handle and then shrink it down to make it a little bit smaller. Now, that's a little small on the screen over there. So I'm looking over here. That's a good sized ball. Now remember, the crosshairs should be on top of the center piece right here. We're going to move that in there and good. Now we're centered and we can begin coding. So you could, if you want, you could utilize different color balls and you can call on these different costumes in a different game. So let's now click on the coding tab. Now when we begin our coding of the ball, the first thing that I want to make sure that we begin to do though is we establish the variables for the game. Variables are temporary holders. So whenever something is changing, varying, it's placed in what's known as a variable. We're going to create two variables. And I'm going to click on that. I'm going to say make variable. And the first variable that I'm going to create is called player1 score. Whoops, if I could type, that'd be great. We're going to keep it as for all sprites and then click OK. And you'll see now that it appears there. There's a check, already a check. And it also appears here in my game area. I'm going to click make another variable that's going to keep track of the player2 score. Player2 score. Once again, it'd be great if I could type. For all sprites and click OK. It defaults to also being checked. I'm going to come over here to my work area and I'm going to put it over here. So we have player1 score and player2 score. And those are my two variables that I'm going to be using to track my scoring. At this point in the tutorial, we're going to really start to jam on building some code here. So what I would recommend as I do this, I'm going to move steadily through it. However, you can pause the video and go back at any point during this video. So if I move too fast, pause, and then if you want, just rewind the video and then take a look and see what I'm doing. So let's get going. Right now, we established our variables, and we're going to now start writing the rest of our gaming code here. To begin this, we're going to add a control, or excuse me, an event, so that when someone clicks the green flag, everything begins. We're going to want to make sure the ball always starts off in the middle. So we're going to say go to 0, 0, which is dead center. Okay, so go to X coordinate 0 and then Y coordinate 0. One of the things too is we can adjust the way the ball orients. That means the way it turns. And we're going to start off by moving it to a 45-degree position. So let's take a look at how do we do that. So we're going to select point in direction. I'm going to snap that in place. Now it says 90. When you look at these numbers and you click on it, you'll notice that a dial appears and it looks a lot like a clock. And you'll see that if we start off here, it's at 0, 90 degrees, 180, 270, or excuse me, minus 90 or 270 in certain programming worlds, and then back to 0. So we're going to go halfway between minus 90 and 0, which is minus 45. So this is always going to send it off into a 45-degree direction every game. Now you can randomize that in your own game, and that I would encourage you to check out and how to do. So we'll go there, minus 45. We're going to then do what's known as initializing the score. Initializing the score means setting the scores to 0. to where they start. To do that, we're going to go to our variables, and then we're going to say set the player 1 score to 0. I'm going to right click and duplicate it, and I'm going to select player 2 score also to 0. All right, this starts the game. Now, once we get past this, the game is going to run until one player beats the other. So let's say the top or the end game score will be 5. We're going to have the game run over and over and over until player 1 reaches 5 or player 2 reaches 5. To do that, we're going to use what's known as a loop. And the loop that we're going to use is something known as the repeat. We're going to utilize the repeat until. So that means keep doing this until this happens. So to do that, we're going to have to use what's known as an operator. An operator is something that allows you to check a logical condition or a mathematical condition. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to utilize the OR. So we're going to keep on playing the game until player 1 score is equal to 5 or player 2 score is equal to 5. To do that, we have this check in here. Place that into the first box. Oops. And as you can see, it can be very finicky. So be patient. I'm going to drag that back in there. And I'm going to drag that until that lights up and then let it go. Now, obviously, it's not going to be 50. I double click it and I change the value to 5. But what goes in there? What goes in there is the variable, the player 1 score. So this will hold the value of the score. And every time a player scores 1, 2, 3, 4, it's going to check to see if it's equal to 5. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to right click that and duplicate it. And I'm going to place it over there. But instead of player 1 score, I'm going to drag out player 2 score. So now it's going to keep checking the value of the score in the variable. All right. Once we know we've established that, we can then begin to move the ball because that is what we're coding. And we'll say move 5 steps. Now, this is also another value you can change up to see how it changes your ball. Now, as it's moving, we want it to always be detecting or sensing. And this is a big concept in game development. So when on the edge, it's not going to be a sensing. So we're going to select motion. And when on the edge, bounce. All right. If it's not on the edge, it's going to be hitting something else. Is it touching the paddle? Then it's going to bounce. Is it touching the wall? Well, then it could also be something else happening, and that will be a score, right? So if the ball gets past the paddle, it's going to change the score. So let's first of all check to see if the ball is touching the paddle, which is black, let's do something. To do that, we're going to make use of what's known as another control item, but it's known as an if. If the ball is touching the black paddle, we're going to bounce it. So if, we're going to go into sensing, we're going to say touching black. We could use the eyedropper to make sure we get it exactly right. So if it's touching black, what do? We are going to then turn it 90 degrees. We're going to go up here to motion, and then we're going to turn it to 90. We're going to add another control, and we're going to say if, make sure it's placed after the other if touching this color red, We are going to turn it 90 degrees. Okay, so now we're going to focus on the ball not touching a paddle or one of these scoring walls, but also the out of bounds. To do that, we're just going to come in here and we are going to say if it's touching the blue, let's turn that 90 degrees. So I have my if, and I'm going to say sensing, if touching, using my eyedropper, the blue, I'm going to turn 90 degrees. Now I could have duplicated those blocks to be quicker, but I just wanted to drag those out. All right, now let's focus on scoring. We're going to utilize another if. Place it after the last one. And we are going to now sense the colors behind the paddles. So let's focus on when player 1 here scores. If touching, using the eyedropper, the red border, we are going to do what? We're going to change player 1's score because it got past the player 2 paddle. To do that, we're going to go to our variables, and you'll see that it says change the variable by 1 or whatever value. Drag that in. We're now increasing the player 1 score by 1. Once we've done that, let's give a brief pause. Go back to control. We'll say, wait 1 second. And then start from the middle again. So we're going to send the ball right back to the middle of the board. So that's when player 1 scores. Let's try it out. The ball moves, it bounces off, bounces. So now we should see the red miss. And sure enough, the score went up and it started back at the middle. So it is working so far. Now we have to set it up so what happens when player 2 scores. Now, we could easily do this by copying or duplicating the blocks. So let's find our if. Right click on the if block itself and then duplicate and snap it into place after the other one. This time though, when it touches this orange color. So we have to say, when it touches the orange, using my eyedropper, we're going to increase player 2's score by 1. All of this continues to happen inside. I'm going to try to zoom in here for you so you can see it a little bit better. All of this is happening in the loop. When it gets to 5, it's going to exit the loop and then end the game. And that's where we want to just give some kind of message saying who won. To do that, we'll just use another control and we'll come in here and we'll say if player 1 score equals 5, then we'll say player 1 wins, else player 2 wins. We're going to grab our operators. Add our variable. Change the 50 to a 5. And now a new block is what's known as the looks. And we have these say blocks. We could say player 1 wins. Else, if the player 1 score is not equal to 5, then we say player 2 wins. All right. So now we'll test out our game. Player 2 scores. Player 2 scores. Player two scores 3. Trying to speed this up a little bit. 4. Player 2 wins. And we have now successfully completed this simple classic game of Pong. Okay, so here we are now. We're going to get ready to take this idea of Pong and modify it to have a Star Wars feel to it. Now, you could do almost any kind of theming for your game of Pong. Over here on the screen, we could see that you're going to start from the beginning, and you're going to start with a new project. And let's go ahead and we're going to rename it, as we always do with everything, and we're going to call it Star Wars Pong. Now, I love Star Wars, and in this game, we're going to use lightsabers instead of paddles, and we're going to also add some sounds that make it feel more like some kind of event in Star Wars, right? So the lightsaber clashing. We're also going to change up the colors a little bit. All right, so to begin, you are going to get rid of Scratch the Cat here, so we're just going to delete him. Now, in this module, I'm also providing you with some downloads that you're going to place inside of Scratch. So this is a new concept for many students who are working with Scratch, and we're going to see that we're going to add these lightsaber graphic files. They're known as PNGs, Portable Network Graphics, and they allow for what's known as transparency, which means even though that they're square graphics, the background color will shine through the edges of the graphic, making it look like, well, it's floating there or it's not a square. So let's just take a look at that. Okay, so you're going to come down here and you're going to click Upload the Sprites. So here I have the lightsabers saved. Now, these are not perfect lightsabers, so I encourage you to open up your own graphics editing program, such as Microsoft Paint, or if you are comfortable with using something like Photoshop from Adobe, you can modify these sprites, you can change them, you can even bring in your own. So here is a Jedi lightsaber glowing green and a Sith lightsaber glowing red. If I hold my control key down on the PC, I could select both, and then I click Open. Now what they will do is they will bring both of these into Scratch. There's another thing that we're also going to import, and that is also the sounds. So before we do that, there's a couple of ways you can bring a sound file into our particular environment here. But I know that once again, we're going to be using a ball and all the code will be attached to that ball. So I'm going to also attach my sound to that ball. All right, I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to choose my sprite. And I'm going to select a ball once again. And there it is. It's a little bit big. I know that. So if I go into my costumes here, I could resize it by clicking on it, just like we did in the first tutorial. And I'm going to resize it and place it right there on the middle. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so we could see it a little bit better. Okay, now, while I'm in here, up here in the upper left-hand corner, I can click on the Sounds tab. And what we're going to see is I already have a sound in here, a pop and a boing sound, but now I'm going to upload the lightsaber clashing sound. To do that, I could come down here and then I am going to upload a sound. I've provided to you, it's a lightsaber clash.mp3. MP3 is a sound file that can be played on the computer, and Scratch allows the use of an MP3 file, and it also supports the use of a WAV file, a .wav. I recommend the MP3 because it sounds a little bit better, but you could use a WAV file if you like. So I click on that and I bring that in. And there is my sound file. And if I want to hear it, I could see that I have the file in here. Now, the one thing that I would tell you to do when you bring in your sound file, this is known as a sound wave, and this is a visual representation of what the sound looks like. And in Scratch, you have a very, very simple editor, which means you could change it, and you can come in here now and you can delete off parts. So one of the things I like to do is shorten my WAV files so they're quick. Otherwise, it might take a second for it to load in the game, and that's a delay, and you don't want that to happen. All right, to shorten it, one thing I could do is I could take my mouse and I could left click and drag a section of the sound file and I could get rid of it. So once I do that, I could click delete. And you can see that it shortened it. Now, if I play that, it's still kind of long. I want just the clashing sound. So I'm going to take a little bit off the beginning. Maybe right about there. I'll try that. And I'm going to take maybe just a little bit off the end area over here. Let's try that out. Still seems a little long. I'm going to take my editor one last time and chop off that last piece. All right, now that sounds a little bit more appropriate for our game as the ball hits the lightsaber. Once again, you could adjust this. This is now going to become your game, and you can modify it and make it into anything you want. The next part of getting our game set up is going to be setting up a good background. Now, once again, I went with a background that looks and feels probably more like the movie Tron than Star Wars, so you can do your own. But let's go ahead and begin now. Take a look at a new backdrop. So what we'll do is we'll click on the stage here, and of course the sounds tab appears. But if you click on backdrops, we're going to create our own backdrop, and there's a variety of ways you could do this too. You can even bring in a picture that you find or you create it once again in another graphics tool or on the internet, and you could use that as your backdrop in your game. But I think what we're going to do here is keep it simple. We're going to go with a black background and a blue border between the sides. Okay, now when I come in here, I'm going to work in the bitmap mode to work with this particular graphic. So I'm going to click on that button down there at the bottom, and then I'm going to come up here to my fill color, and I'm going to slide the brightness all the way to black. I could actually do all this to 0, which makes a solid black color. And then I'll come in, I'm going to click on my rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a background color for our game, and you can see that appear here. The next thing I'm going to do is then create a border that's kind of a blue glowing color. We could come over here and we're going to stretch out. There's a couple ways you could do it. You could stretch it out as a line, or you could stretch it out as another rectangle. Okay, now we're going to create our border, and we're going to do that by switching back over to the vector mode, which is a little bit easier to draw in some days. So we're going to see that we have a fill color and an outline here. I'm going to select, there's two ways we could do this really. We could select the line tool, which will only give us an outline, or we can select a square, which will allow us to give us a fill and an outline for that kind of glowingish effect. So let's go ahead and we'll draw a rectangle down here, but we're going to change our fill color now, and we're going to go back to like a bluish color because I think the blue contrast kind of works for this, and we'll go something like that and brighten it up a little bit. Now, the outline is, I have it at 50 here. Obviously, that's too big. Let's make that about 15, and then we're going to have a glowingish outline, and we'll go along the lines there. Maybe darken it a little bit, and then we could see it glowing. So you could work with all of these. Now we're going to come in here, and I'm going to stretch out my border down the middle here, and I could drag that so I could have it right in the middle. So you could have any kind of border as long as it separates both sides. All right, so the next thing we have to do to prepare to do our development is to create the scores. There's a variety of ways you could do this. Now, in the last game that we built, we utilized the built-in feature of the variable. We're still going to be using variables, but we could also make our own score. So to do that, we're going to come over here. We're going to paint a sprite, and what we'll do is we are going to come in and create a separate sprite for each score. So we'll have a Jedi score sprite and a Sith score sprite. Inside of each, we will then create a series of costumes. So I'm going to come over here. I have costume 1. I'm going to rename that to Jedi Score 1. And I'm going to take my text tool. I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to type the word or the number 1. So I have this here, and I could grab my mouse, and then of course I could make this a little bit bigger, and I'll place this right on the center. Now you can also change the color of this. So I could also come in here now, and I could change up the color to be a little bit closer and matching to what the border might be. But that'll work pretty good for us. And we could also add an outline that's making it glow a little bit. And there we go. So now you have the first scoring digit. You're going to create a score for each digit. So coming over here with your mouse, you're going to right click and you could select duplicate. Once that is selected, you can come in here, double click and make that number 2. And then you're going to duplicate again, double click 3, duplicate again, double click 4, duplicate one last time, and then 5. So you will do that for each score set. So I'm going to come over here now. I'm going to click on my sprite. It's called Sprite 1, but I'm going to call it Jedi Score. You can then come in here if you like, and you can then duplicate that. And we have the Jedi score here and Jedi score here. Obviously, this is going to be the Sith score. And when we click on that, you'll want to come in here and rename these costumes. Sith score 1, Sith score, whoops, if we could type, Sith score 2, and so on. So now we are all set to begin to actually build out our Star Wars Pong game. We have our lightsabers, we have our sound effects, we have our background, and we all have the scoring digits. Now, when I look at these scoring digits, they do seem a little large. So what I can do is I could actually adjust those sizes if I like by going into each one of these and resizing it. So for example, before I make even the copy of them, if I come back over here, we could see that that's how that's going to look there. So maybe what we could do is change up that size a little bit. If I go back here to Jedi Score 1, if it's too big, using my mouse, I could resize it just a little bit and then place it. So now when I look at everything else, I have to kind of come back in here and maybe adjust each one. But as you can see, they're not much different. That's something you want to give some thought to before you begin doing it, or you could just resize them as you go along. Okay, so now we're going to begin taking our next step. A couple of things we need to do right off the bat here now is to adjust the lightsabers and the scores and then lay everything out as they need to be. So what you're going to want to do is click on your Jedi lightsaber, and you're going to want to make sure that you convert it to vector graphics by clicking the button down below. Now, this says convert to bitmap. Click the convert to vector graphics. When you do, you'll see that you'll get a set of handles when you click on it, which allows you to resize it and rotate it. Okay, what you're going to want to do though is make sure you orient it. That means to turn it until it's pointing up and down, and then place it right back in the middle crosshair, right in the center of your canvas, as we have done with all the other objects that we've created. I'm going to resize it a little bit more. Now this is also where you can make the game a little bit more challenging as you go level by level. Even if you want to do it as a level game, you can make the lightsabers smaller and smaller. So I'm going to keep on resizing that. I think that's a good size. And then I'm going to just drag that over here. Maybe just turn it just a bit so it's a little bit up and down. There we go. And I'm going to do the same thing with the Sith's lightsaber. Once again, making sure that I am in the vector mode. And you can tell by the toolbar and down at the bottom now, my button, after I click convert to vector, it's going to say convert to bitmap. So you make sure you have that handle going on there, resize it, and then drag it, and then ultimately rotate it out like that. So you can make these any size you like, but then place them on opposite sides. And then of course you have your score, you have your Jedi score. I'm going to place that up above here. And then my Sith score, I'm going to place this, oops, I can't grab them. And I'm going to place it over there. Okay, so I could also start them off at 1, or I could start them off at 0. Now we left off last time where we have 1, but we need to start off at score 0. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate that and then come back in here, double click it, and make that 0. So now we start off at Jedi score 0. Go over your Sith score, we have to do the same thing. One of the things that you should be noticing is when you make mistakes, you can recover, you can fix things. Just be patient with yourself. So right click, duplicate, click on that score, and then come in, and then click 0, and we should be now good to go. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out of that guy a little bit. Now here we are, the stage is now set. Let's begin taking a look at the code. Okay, at this point now we're going to begin to build the controls for the paddles or the lightsabers. So we've done the same concept in the Pong game, and we're going to apply that now to the lightsabers. To do that, we are going to come in and we are going to work on the green lightsaber first, and this is going to follow, like I said, the same process of the Pong game. So we're going to come in here and we're going to utilize the keyboard. So we'll say when we'll utilize the up arrow, and we'll move it 10 steps, or excuse me, change. We're going to have 10 steps. We're going to be changing the Y so it goes up and down on the Y axis. So we'll do that. I'll just duplicate that real fast, and instead of doing the up arrow, we'll change that to the down arrow, and we make that a -10. So it goes down. Okay, so there you go. That is your movement for the green lightsaber. And now let's apply that to the red lightsaber. You could begin doing that real easily just by dragging those blocks and putting it right on top of that red lightsaber. So the Sith lightsaber. So instead of using the up arrow, let's utilize the W key, and that'll be up. I'm going to duplicate that. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Let's duplicate both blocks. And we're going to utilize the S key to go down. Where did that go? Where is that S key? S usually comes before T, right? Yep. So we're going to go there and do -10. Okay, so there you go. That's going to control our paddles. We could test them out real fast. So I have my up arrow, my down arrow, and my up key, and my down key, the W and the S keys. Now, most of the game is built around the actual ball that's used in the game. And now we're going to take that and begin building with that. It's going to start with when green flag clicked, and we're going to orient the game or initialize it. So we'll say points towards, let's say the green lightsaber. And then we're going to also start the ball at the middle of the screen, which is 0, 0 on the XY coordinate. And then we get into the fun part. Okay, so the actual game is going to be played to a max score of 5, just like in the original Pong game we did. And that's going to be controlled by a loop. So we're going to come in and we'll do a repeat. And this repeat here, it'll be a repeat until, actually, right? So we'll bring it in. And we're going to say we're going to repeat the game until either the Jedi scores 5 or the Sith scores 5. To do that, we're going to use an operator that's going to compare the score, and it's going to be an OR. So we will then say the Jedi score equals, oops, that always happens, right? You got to be very careful as you're snapping these blocks, and they could be a little maddening at times. So we'll go to our variables, and we'll say the Jedi score equals 5, or the Sith score equals 5. So what we'll do is we'll just duplicate that, drag that into there, and instead of the Jedi, we'll put the Sith, and there we go. We'll just move this over there. So there we have our condition set, and now let's begin to move the ball. So we're going to move it 5 steps, and if on the edge, we're going to bounce. Okay, so that gets the ball kind of moving. So if we start it there, you can see that it's going through the lightsabers. Now we have to start to set up the sensing and the scoring. To do that, we're going to utilize an if-else. So going into the control here, you can see we have an if, then else. So taking that, we're going to drag that out into this spot here. And in this game, where it's a little bit different is instead of sensing a black paddle, which we really can't do here, we have to set it up in a different way, and we have to kind of set it up so it's knowing where the lightsaber is. So what we're going to do is we're going to check to see if the ball goes past the lightsaber. So we know that as it's moving left to right, that's the x-axis, and we know that this is kind of staying in its place. If the ball goes past the X point for the lightsaber, well, then it's going to score. So that's what we'll do. So we begin to do that. with another conditional. We'll grab an operator and we'll come in here. If the X position, which is down here under the motion tabs, if the X position is greater than the position of the lightsaber, so we'll come in here and we go to our sensing, which is right here. We're going to take that and place that in there. And what we're going to say is greater than the X position of the Sith lightsaber. So we'll change this to the Sith lightsaber, and that generates the change in that dropdown. So you have to change Sith lightsaber first, and then that'll allow you to pick the X position. So it's basically saying if the ball goes past, if the X position of the ball is greater than the X position of the Sith lightsaber, which is actually over here at this point. I'm sorry, the ball will be it's traveling right over here. If it's going past there, you know now it's going to hit the wall. That's a score. To do that, we're then, to create the scoring mechanism, we're going to utilize what's known as a broadcast. So coming into your events, you are going to look for a broadcast, which essentially says, okay, the Jedi scored. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a new message, and let's just call it the Jedi scored. So that's a broadcast. What does that mean? All right. When you broadcast something, something else is waiting for it. It's waiting to hear it. Okay. And what's waiting to hear it? Well, the scoring mechanism. Now let's go ahead and build that. To build the scoring mechanism, we're going to go ahead and select the Jedi score first. And we're going to initialize this. So when the game starts, in other words, when the green flag is clicked, we're going to switch to a costume. So we're going to switch to the 0 score. So this is initializing this. So it looks like we may have neglected to set up a 0 score. So to fix that, we might have to go back into our costumes here and let's take a look. So we have, Jedi score 1 is 0. Okay, and then, it looks like Jedi score 1 is 6 here. So that's a little confusing. So let's open this up. We'll change that to a 1 if yours is messed up like mine. And we should be okay. And then Jedi score 0. So that's a little bit more clear. Let's go back into our code now. There we go. Change that to Jedi score 0. So it takes it back to 0. Now, once we do that, we're going to also set the Jedi score to 0. Now, this is something that helps keep tabs of things, but we're going to take a look at our variable, and then we're going to say set Jedi score to 0. How do we adjust the scores? Now, this is where we get back to the broadcasts. When I receive the Jedi scored broadcast, we're going to increase the score. And what we're doing here is we are now initializing the score. To do that, we are going to come in and we're going to have an if that's going to see if the flag goal is going to be equal to 1 to change that. Now, we're going to come back to that in a moment here. All right, so I'm going to go to my operator, and I'm going to say, if my goal, which remember, this is that flag variable that we created, and it's just really telling you to do something or not do something, a 1 or a 0. So we're going to say do that and then increase the score. And in increasing the score, you could do it by saying next costume, and then we're going to reset the flag back to 0. And I just realized this should be goal. Okay, so next costume, go into our variable, set the goal back to 0. No, this is right. We'll put that back to Jedi score. And then change Jedi score by 1. Okay, so we can run that. Let's see if the ball goes by. Oh, not that way. See if it's going, and nothing happened yet. Okay, so let's take a look at this and go back to our code on the ball. In our code on the ball, we have to add a few more items. After the Jedi scored, the ball is going to go back to the middle of the court. Go to 0, go to 0. Okay, so you have 0, 0, and we're going to reset that flag and the variable of the goal. Set goal equal to 1. Let's try that again. Oh, it's bouncing kind of oddly. I'm going to move my... Oh, there we go. And the score just changed. Let it go by again. There we go. And the score just changed again. All right. We're going to take that same concept and we're going to now carry it forward into our else. So obviously, if the Sith or if the Jedi didn't score, the Sith scored. So if we're checking here to see if the Jedi scored, if the Jedi didn't score, then else the Sith scored. Now, as we get into this else statement in here, though, we are going to use another nested if then else. So we have one if else in here, and then we're going to come in and we're going to add another if else. And with this one, we're going to go ahead and duplicate this for a second. I'm going to bring it down into here, but this time not the Sith lightsaber glow, but it's the Jedi lightsaber glow. However, this is a problem. Notice that the ball, when it's greater than, and as it moves to the right, it's increasing the X value. It's greater than, but when we go to the left, it's decreasing. So this greater than symbol, that's not going to work. So let's just take that out and let's go ahead and switch it to a less than, and we'll swap this in for that and this in for that. And we can get rid of that one. And then we see that it goes past the Jedi's lightsaber. We're going to do a broadcast. I'm going to duplicate that and put this in here. And the one thing we could add in both of these spots is we can reorient the positioning of it. This is something you can try putting in or putting out. So we'll say points towards and we'll do another points towards. So, or we could actually switch that. Go back like that. All right. So now we're moving things along. We see we have this very, very tricky nested area in here, but we have to keep the ball moving. So if we continue on here, we can then say move in our else. We'll go 7 steps. And if on the edge, bounce. So really, the main part of the game is all right in this area right here. Everything in here. This is the game being played. So we have to then create what? Yep, that's right. The end of the game. So now we're going to come in here and it says if Jedi scored, what if the Jedi score equals 5, end the game, or else the Sith one wins. Okay, so we're going to come in. We're going to come into controlling this. We're going to grab another if then else, add that right to the end. And we'll say, let's see here, we'll grab our condition and we'll say, if the Jedi score is equal to 5, then we'll say something like this. The Jedi wins. Else, the Sith is victorious, or something like that. You can put in any message you really want. Now, we do have to add one more thing, and that is this broadcast. So we say the Jedi scored here, but here the Sith scored, and we have to do a new message. Sith scored. Click OK, and then we have to create the score for the Sith. So we're going to click on the Sith score. Now, what we can do is to make it quicker, I'm going to go to the Jedi score sprite, and I'm going to drag that block set over to Sith score. And I'm also going to drag the when green flag clicked over to the Sith score. And they're already in there. Now it's just a matter of adjusting them. Switch costume. So it looks like we have the same problem here again. So we're going to have to go into the costumes. I made a boo-boo, and I have to go in here and make that 0 and Sith score 1. So at least the number of the naming of it matches the actual sprite. Okay, so we're going to set the Sith score equal, oops. Where is it? Did it go in there? Sith score 0. Sith score 1. There we go. Hey, we all make mistakes, right? So there we go. Sith score 0. We're going to set the Sith score to 0 there. And now when we receive the Sith scored, we're going to set up everything in there and then change the Sith score by 1. Okay, at this point, we're going to make some final additions and our game should be ready. So you can see the game is, kind of moving along here, but now we have to add in a final few pieces regarding sensing. So let's take a look at how to do that now. So while still clicking on the ball, we're going to be applying some block code here. And to do that, we're going to sense whether or not it touches the lightsabers. So we're going to come in, we're going to grab an event, and we're going to tie that when green flag is clicked. We're going to create a loop. So we're going to be running this or polling it the entire game. So polling means it's constantly running, and we're going to say forever, and we'll bring in an if statement. So it's going to test to see if the lightsabers touch. So we'll say if touching. So we'll go to sensing. And we will say, we'll go with the green lightsaber. And then we're going to come in now and, we're going to, once it, the ball touches it, we're going to point it back towards the Sith lightsaber. And we will grab that. So we'll go to motion and we'll grab points towards the Sith. And then we are going to kind of do a turning of the ball to make it a little bit more random when it hits. And this is also an area that you can, really modify and change to make however you want your own game to behave. Definitely change these values in here. So let's go. We're going to come in here. We're going to go operators, and we're going to utilize something known as the pick random. So it's going to pick a random number between the values we say. So since we want it to bounce back, we're going to do this. It's measured in degrees. Degrees are how we measure angles. So it's when the ball comes into the lightsaber and then bounces out. So let's do a minus 30 degrees to 30 degrees. Once again, change these values up to see different results that might make your game even more random. The last thing we're going to add then is some sound. And this is what I think a lot of people have been waiting for as you build this game, right? So we are going to play the sound. And that's going to make sure it's set to the lightsaber clash sound that you've uploaded along with the graphics. All right, so there you have the sensing and so on. So we're going to right click on this and we'll duplicate it. And this time now, where this will be for the Sith, so we'll just change this over here to the Sith lightsaber glow. We point this back towards the Jedi, and then it still makes that sound. So let's check that out. So that brings us to the end of this tutorial to get you to build your own lightsaber clash game where the Sith battle the Jedi. But once again, now you have the base of the game. Now you can make it your own. And some of the things that I had said before, you could change up certain values throughout the game and you can make, variations of it. Now, if you're going to go do that, one thing that I would recommend is that when you go back into your My Stuff, you're going to want to make sure that maybe when you come into it, say, for example, I have 2 versions of the game. If I click on that, it's going to take me here. You're going to want to make sure that you have a possible copy of this. So one thing that you could do is you can open it up, and when you click see inside, you can give it a new name. And that's one thing you can think about doing. Okay, that is all we have for this particular tutorial. I'm hoping that you enjoyed it, and may the Force be with you.